This is Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. On the show, you'll hear from innovators in the food space. We'll have disruptive conversations with people from around the globe who are taking the lead on topics like food sustainability, ending world hunger, food security, and so much more. I'm your host, Paul Newnham. In today's episode, I'm joined by Eve Theroux-Paul. Eve is the author of Hungry, Avocado Toast, Instagram Influencers, and Our Search for Connection and Meaning. And Eve is also the executive director of the Food for Climate League, a woman-led, trailblazing 501c3 nonprofit that develops narrative strategies and behavioral design interventions to scale and democratize climate-smart food culture. And Eve also talks about her efforts to change perceptions around beans and the potential of food as a solution to the health and environmental crisis. Let's get into it. We're sitting here in Mexico, and I am absolutely honored to have Eve Theroux-Paul with me. And so, Eve, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm going well. It's nice and warm, probably a little bit different to Chicago at the moment.
Yes, I'm just reveling in the fact that there is sunshine.
Absolutely. And so tell us a little bit about who are you?
Many ways to answer that question, but I'm an author and a researcher. I've, for the last 15 years, been doing research on the rise of foodie culture globally. And I'm also now the founder and executive director of a nonprofit called Food for Climate League. And we work to make climate-smart food choices the norm using narrative and behavioral design methodologies.
Amazing. Tell me a little bit about what have you focused on in your books. Tell us what you've started on in there.
So I myself am a millennial, and around 2010, I found myself living in New York City, getting my master's degree in writing, and not making a whole lot of money, yet spending what little discretionary time and income I had on food and food media. And I soon recognized that that was happening with others around me who were in a very similar financial situation. And I started to ask myself, why? Why is it that young people today are spending so much of their discretionary time and income on food? And once I started to dig into it, I saw that it was connected to rising rates of depression and stress and loneliness and anxiety that had a relationship with the rise of the digital age. And once I started to make all these connections, I became so fascinated by this that I never stopped doing the research. So I've now written 2 books on the why behind today's biggest food trends and looking at the emotional underpinnings as well as the cultural impacts that are influencing our ability to meet some of our core emotional needs and the ways that people use food as a coping mechanism for unmet needs.
I love that. So looking at the why, because often people are focused on what's happening, how's it happening, but really going below that and thinking about why are we facing some of the challenges? You know, we have so many big issues around food, from rising rates of obesity to under and over nutrition. You've got mass issues around agricultural impacts around climate change. We see major issues around other health outcomes. So help us understand a little bit more about this why.
So my area of research is specifically around when people have a choice, what are they choosing and what is motivating that choice? Many of the barriers that you just went through are part of a system that inhibits people's ability to choose, right? That there aren't options available to people that are healthy or that are affordable or that are culturally relevant, that there's foods that are wasted or misallocated throughout the system. What my area of expertise is more so around understanding why somebody will choose a certain food or way of eating, or why they're choosing to interact with food media in a particular way. And my career began with a genuine curiosity to understand myself, then progressed to understanding what millennials in general want in order to help food companies and hospitality companies and farming groups respond to the demand. At the time, we were seeing things like the rise of kale salads and avocado toast and quinoa bowls. along with a young generation that was no longer responding to billboard ads. They needed a new kind of form of marketing to speak to them and to move them. And now what I'm focused on is how do we then impact people's motivations to guide people towards more sustainable food choices, more climate smart food choices.
Yeah. And so as you started to work that out, what did you learn about yourself in that?
It's a great question. I mean, I think that there's many things that I have ultimately changed about the way that I live based on my research. So I think unrelated to food, well, it is tangentially related. I don't have my phone with me all the time. And I often put my phone away. After doing research on the rising rates of, again, depression, stress, loneliness, anxiety, I was able to see how directly tied it is to the bombardment of information, to distraction. And I'm not perfect about it, but I have drastically reduced the amount of time that I spend on my phone, and I don't always have it with me because I want to be present with people. So that was a big life change from doing this research. What is related to that as well, though, was I realized that when I was posting about a food experience, it was because I wasn't experiencing that in real time with people that I cared about, that I was in some way looking for validation from strangers. And doing this research has made me rethink what my own relationship is with food, but more importantly, I work really hard to cultivate community. And I now live just outside of Chicago. My neighbors will probably be able to tell you I work really hard to cultivate community. It is important to me that I'm facilitating opportunities for people to meet in person, to eat together in person. And that is absolutely after learning about the correlations between mental health, food occasions, a relationship with technology, and our lack of time together. I mean, food has so many beautiful aspects to it. The part that really was my gateway to this was its role in mental health. Nowadays, we could have a totally separate conversation about the connection between food and the climate crisis and how that impacts what we eat, because that has also completely revolutionized my diet.
Yeah. But you were talking there about something that's really critical. So you talked about community and cultivating community, and then you automatically connected that with food. So how have you found out about that connection between food and community, and how's that turned out for you, but also what you've seen in your work?
I think that it is something that's unique about us as Homo sapiens. And I talked to Dr. Robin Dunbar about this many years ago. There are not very many animal species that eat together. And for human beings, we're very unique in the fact that we will commune for eating occasions even when it's not necessary. So even when people are bringing their own food, we still prefer to eat with one another. And there are studies that show the benefit of looking other people in the eye, of if you're being served food by someone you know and love, the food is going to taste better to you. There are all of these physiological and psychological aspects to eating together that are very unique to the human experience. And what I've also found is that when you take the connection, the communitarian part of eating away, you're less likely to be enjoying your food. But that inherent craving for community is coming out by people posting about what it is that they're eating for other people to see it at another time, or live streaming themselves eating. It's just inherent to who we are. And there is a dopamine reward system, a serotonin reward system. Our bodies reward us for dining and eating with others.
It's like we're seeking that connection, and so we're sharing it, but then through actually seeking that connection, we're losing the connection with the people
Exactly.
we're with. No, I can reflect and go, yeah, you're right. You know, in our family, we often will have no phones at the dinner table kind of thing.
Good.
And
You should always do that.
those kinds of tips. But it is hard, it's very quick because phones connect to us. Like you go, oh, we need to remember something, or you need to search for something, or you want to capture something.
I have a good tip, actually. I encourage anybody who's listening, always remove your phone from the dinner table. Do not even have it out. If you have your phone on the table, there are also really interesting studies that show that you will have a less deep conversation because you are expecting to be interrupted. So put the phone entirely away. And the rule is if somebody says, oh, I want to look this up, you don't do it right then. If it's important enough, you'll remember and look it up later.
Yeah, it's very true. So, okay, no, this is really good. So lots of challenge already. And what I love about talking to you, Eve, is that you've actually got studies and you've got research that backs up what some of us already maybe feel, but we don't know.
Yeah.
And I think you bring that to how do you actually make changes, and how do we try and address some of the challenges that are in our society? So talk to me a little bit about how you're applying some of that research now into the real world, in terms of you've understood some of the why. What are you doing now?
Now, what do you do with it?
How are you doing it?
It's a great question. And I decided not to go into academia specifically because of this, because I wanted to really be taking the research that exists and mining what those in academia are doing successfully, but bringing it to the surface so that it can be applied in the real world. So I have great opportunity to do that nowadays through my work at Food for Climate League. And I'll give one simple example, which is we are now running a program to motivate chefs to cook plant-forward foods.
Okay.
What we found at the very beginning of the program is that when you said plant-forward, chefs thought of spinach, they thought of healthy, they thought of not tasty, and not what people want. And long story short, they weren't very motivated to cook plant-forward foods. And if their boss was asking them to do that, that meant that the food that was being served was not going to be made with love and therefore was not going to taste terribly good. So you had a demotivated workforce and not terribly great food, which meant unhappy eaters, excess food waste. So our team at Food for Climate League came in. First, we did in-depth interviews with chefs throughout this particular ecosystem to get to know people and not just understand what do they think of plant forward, but to get to know why are they in this job? What did they find fulfilling in their lives? What did they grow up eating? And by doing that work, we ended up developing a 90-minute curriculum about plant-forward foods, but it's telling a different story. And we talk about the fact that plant-forward is a way to bring career security, because a lot of these individuals were saying, why should I cook this way? I'm probably going to leave this job. Well, this is what all the top chefs are doing. This is what all the cool restaurants are doing. You learn to cook plant-forward, you're setting yourself up for career success and security, okay? Playing into an emotional need for, again, security and control in somebody's life. We also talk a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is here in the United States that this program originated. And we talk about the fact that African heritage diet, Asian heritage diet, Latino heritage diet, it's plant-forward. This is not a new way of cooking. And we allow people the space and the time to reflect on the foods they grew up eating, that their grandparents grew up eating, and we allow them to see themselves in this work. And then we talk about the climate, but we frame it in a way in the US that's very much about the opportunity to play with new ingredients. There are 400,000 edible plant species, and 75% of our diet is comprised of 11 of those, which is just so boring. And when you think about it from a culinary perspective. Anyhow, long story short is that we changed the way we talked about this, and then suddenly we had amazing engagement. We have been measuring perception before and after this intervention and saw that people more closely align, personally identify with plant-forward cooking, and we had a behavior metric. In this case, we were measuring whether people signed up for a 6-month skill-based training to learn how to cook plant-forward foods, and we have over 80% of people who go to this 90-minute training are making a 6-month commitment and going to a 6-month skill-based training.
And so what I love there is using that insight to flip, I guess, the way that you develop training, because often training is about skills. But what you've done is taken that insights around why people feel about and how they engage, and then use that to actually position the training and the skills, but position that and set it up in a way that actually meets a need.
Right. Well, it is exactly taking this fascination with why do we do anything and trying to understand, well, okay, to have a more sustainable food system, we have to have a workforce that, sure, is capable. But food is love. And if you don't have people who can see themselves in it, if they're doing it begrudgingly, this is never going to work. And in order to make those connections, we had to spend the time getting to know people and figuring out their why, what are their needs, their values, their priorities, and how does this way of cooking, in this particular case, meet their needs and values and priorities. And all we did was connect the dots.
And so as you've kind of continued on, what would you say is kind of on the radar coming up next? Like, where are you wanting to go with some of this work, and where do you want to take it? You've got the Food for Climate League. It's growing.
Yes.
It's new.
Yeah.
What's next?
I'm trying to take it one day at a time. And at the same time, I see amazing growth and impact potential for this organization. And that's in large part because we're seeing the success that we're seeing. And I think all too often we try to tell people to do something and we expect them to be motivated for the reasons why we're motivated. I hear all the time, how do we get people to care about X, Y, and Z? We're facing a lot of really big challenges right now. And particularly in the food system, we're at a critical moment where we need to get people to act. Education alone is not going to get people to act. And maybe profit alone is not going to get people to act. I don't know. It doesn't seem to be enough. There is such an emotional component to food that people feel very triggered when you tell somebody to eat something different. I am personally very encouraged by the role of chefs in restaurants and other large food service operations as the change makers. Because if we get chefs excited about these opportunities and they can present these options to people, that's where we start to change hearts and minds. And it's such a great opportunity, whether it's in a school or at a conference or in a hospital, for someone to just try something new. There's very little risk involved, and they don't need to know how to make it at home necessarily. And so I'm very excited about really using food culture as a mechanism for driving more widespread change. I also think that there's amazing things to do with storytelling. How do you even describe something on menu? So often with the plant-based food movement, we talk about what's not in the food. And we are going against years and years and years, decades, millennia of marketing 101, which is, no, talk about flavor, talk about what's enticing, get people excited. How many people really want a meatless patty? What the heck are you actually eating?
I know. I mean, there's so many times where you sit there and you say you define yourself by what you're not. And it's like, are you scared of what you are? Or are you just unimaginative? And I mean, who wants a meatless patty? Yeah. It doesn't make sense.
But that's what you see on menus all over the place now. And I think that there's this narrative change that needs to happen where this is not being framed as a food movement that's about giving something up, but it's a food movement that's about all there is to gain. There are so many foods right now, so many culinary experiences that we are not taking advantage of. And this is a world that's obsessed with food. Let's play into that.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, one of the things I know you've been doing a little bit of work around is around beans as well. And what's kind of an insight that you've had into beans?
Well, so first and foremost, I think that beans are a really great reminder that we don't need to reinvent the wheel. And I think whether it's in food or in any other industry, I think we're always pulled towards the bright, new, shiny innovation. But sometimes the solution already exists. And in this case, it's a whole, nutritious, widely accessible, culturally relevant food.
It's kind of
called beans.
Amazing. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, when you really look at it, you're like, oh, it's good for the farmer. It's good for the business person who's going to make a great profit. And it's really great for the consumer. So there's that part of it, which I find really interesting, which is a reminder, right, that we don't need to always try to reinvent the wheel. The solution might be here already. It might exist. The other part of this work that I find really interesting is, again, we at Food for Climate League, our team has taken a step back and said, okay, well, how do people currently think about beans? What stories do they tell themselves? What is motivating them or demotivating them to purchase them? And what we found is that a lot of people associate beans with something that's just not special. The ubiquity has actually caused it to be relegated to the back of the pantry and forgotten.
It's like wallpaper.
Yeah, exactly. It's just there, right? And for low-income populations, we found that it's actually associated with poverty. And so people want to move past beans. So we have a team that's working on creating alternative narratives for beans. And this is, again, through one-on-one interviews, talking to many, many, many different people about what motivates them to eat in general, asking them to think about the history and their experience with beans, their interactions with it, and also, again, their biases and what they tell themselves about it. And we've tested multiple narratives. We tested narratives around sustainability, around protein, around general health, local identities, and also around food justice. And what we found so far, and this is tentative results based on our first test, but the rising narrative that people seem attracted to right now is protein, which makes a lot of sense because it fits into all these other food trends, and especially Americans, we're protein crazed, even though we over-consume protein, I believe.
Protein obsessed.
Protein obsessed, completely. But our results also showed that amongst African-American respondents, the message that rose to the very top is about food justice and food equity, and beans being a symbol of a nutritious whole food that is accessible to all.
And I mean, that kind of insight, you could be spending a huge amount of energy, effort, marketing something or trying to communicate something and just not hitting the mark. You're almost wasting time. Whereas with these insights, you're able to actually go, wow, there's a whole different new way of thinking now about how are people engaging with beans or any food group really, but then why do they either lean towards it or pull back from it? And how does this play in? And so it enables more targeting, potential campaigns and potential focus and lots of learning.
I do think of what we do as the nerdiest version of marketing and advertising. I did have a previous life in content marketing and an agency in New York City. And I was able to see how these large brand campaigns and slogans come about. And all too often, it's not informed by rigorous behavioral sciences. Maybe it's a focus group. Many behavioral scientists will tell you that focus groups aren't that great because we're all biased by what other people will say. And particularly at the nexus of food and climate, there's an intention-action gap. And so when you ask people, well, what would motivate you? What would you like to see? People say, oh, sure, I'll spend an extra $1 for something that's good for the planet. But when push comes to shove, that's not the reality. And that's not the reality, not because people don't care, they do care, but people are facing so many other pressures on their lives, and they're trying to pay their bills. They're dealing with inflation. They're dealing with the pending doom of the climate crisis. They're dealing with health issues, with school tuition. There's rising rates of mental health crisis. And people are motivated by what brings them a sense of control and a sense of community, a sense of belonging, safety. People are not chasing after altruism right now because they're simply not well enough to do so. And we need to start empathizing with where people are. Don't trust what they tell you is going to motivate them, and meet them where they are.
And think about how we're doing the positioning so that we're providing solutions to the challenges that they feel and they need, but also at the same time offering solutions which meet some of these other bigger goals so they're helping their health, they're helping the planet, they're helping the farmer in all of those kinds of ways.
Right.
So yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. In terms of just kind of coming to a close, we've gone all over the place a little bit, but we talked a little bit about how you've applied this to yourself in terms of community and thoughts. When people are looking at food, what is one thing that you would say that people should be really thinking about based on your experience in terms of how would you encourage people to just be, I suppose, looking at some of the challenges in a new way?
I wake up every morning and go to work because working at the nexus of food and climate makes me hopeful. I think that food can be a solution to the health crises that we're facing on a physical level and on a mental health level, and it's a solution for planetary health. I personally have sacrificed quite a bit over the last few years to get this organization off the ground, and I do it with a firm belief that change is truly possible and that it's not about suffering, it's not about giving things up. There is a ridiculously delicious and exciting food future ahead for us that's full of community-based moments where we're sharing meals and we know where our foods come from and they're helping us live better lives, both in a physical health way, in the sense that it's allowing us to be strong and improve the health of our bodies, but also cultivating these moments for mental safety and mental well-being, and at the same time, drawing down carbon, putting nitrogen back into the soil, creating nutritionally dense foods because they're growing in this really rich soil. We need food and agriculture to transform in these critically important ways, but when you put all of it together, really we should be eating more flavorful food with more colors, more textures, discovering new flavors, and that to me is exciting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that hope that you bring through what you do. But I also love the excitement in your voice about flavor and it tasting great. As we come to a close, you were talking about moments. And one of the things I like to do is ask people about a specific moment or a meal that they've had, something that just in recent memory that comes to mind. First thing that you've eaten and you've really enjoyed it. Tell us a little bit about it. Where were you? Who were you with? What was it?
Well, I'll go with dinner right before I left to come to Mexico with my family. I made a bean soup.
Right on point.
Right on point. In the Instant Pot in my pressure cooker. And it was so simple. I'm going to give the recipe right now because you can make it really easily. Fennel, 1 whole head of fennel, 1 onion, 5 cloves of garlic.
Amazing.
Saute it. Add in your white beans. And I also used a yellow bean, which I had never actually seen before, but had been given as a gift because in my world, people give me dried beans as a gift. And I was very excited about it.
That's a good world to be in.
Yeah. And cooked it with some veggie stock, blended it with my kids, and I do think this matters, I cooked it with my kids, right? And they put everything in, they blended it, they put the salt and pepper in, squeezed the lemon juice in at the end. There was just a real moment of joy in sitting at the table and watching my almost 2-year-old and my 4-year-old dipping their bread in this soup, my husband, gobbling it down and realizing like, wow, I just made something quickly that is nutritious and delicious and that my entire family is enjoying. And it just kind of gave me that peace of mind. And also it was quiet for a minute because everyone was eating, which was also nice.
That's always amazing. No, I love that. Well, thank you, Eve. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I think the work that you're doing is so critical and hope to check back in soon. But if you want to learn more about Eve's work, check out Food for Climate League, check out her books, and I'll put the links in there for you. And thank you, Eve.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. See you later.
You've been listening to Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. Future Fork is produced by Disruptive Consulting Solutions and supports the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. For more info, head to the website futureforkpodcast.com. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. So you don't miss an episode of Future Fork, make sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Paul Newnham, and I'll see you in the next episode.